Greetings, I'm Doc V. And today I want to talk with you about some changes that have gone on in our society concerning the proper adjudication of wrongdoing. A former prominent New York mayor, which I will not mention his name right now, was recently ordered by a judge to pay $148 million to some women that he was accused of defaming their character. In simpler words, he was fined or ordered to pay $140 million because of defamation of character. During the election, when Donald Trump lost, there was a mad rush to try to overturn the election. There were fake electorates that were hired. There were accusations of miscounting in several of the states. And some of these states that had a heavy electoral presence, there were arguments and fighting against the poll workers, trying to get this thing overturned, where the mayor's lies and manipulation caused these two poll workers, which were two Black women, and they were simply doing their job to the best of their ability. And because the Republicans wanted to win back the presidency, they fought to do everything they could think of to get it overturned. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, they probably would have succeeded. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, a Black man could be shot in the streets with no consequences. 50 to 100 years ago, a Black person could be fired, property destroyed and stolen. And the most that would happen would be just a quick news flash, a cover-up. But times have changed. Things are improving. Things are getting better. A shockwave is going throughout the political arena and throughout the legal arena. After this case, where the mayor was mandated to pay $148 million to these poll workers for destroying their lives. These poll workers, their lives were threatened. Death threats were made toward these women. Terrible things were said. They felt unsafe, even to go out to work or to go out to public. They wondered if they were going to get mobbed or jumped. This is how bad it was. I would like to say that I see the positive, and I see the positive in justice being served in this particular case. Racism, systemic racism, has been going on since the Emancipation Proclamation, when the slaves were freed. And once the slaves were freed, more slaves or more blacks were killed after their freedom than all the years of slavery. Why? Because while blacks were slaves, they were property. They worked for free. They were owned by the master. Once the slaves were released and given their freedom, they were no longer property, but they were competition for jobs. They were competition for housing. They were competition for notoriety or for trying to get recognition or just to be able to live free the American way. So at that point, blacks became a threat. And lynching began. Blacks being killed, blacks being cheated out of jobs, blacks being attacked. It was just a terrible time in our history where this has happened. Then we had the civil rights movements back in the 60s, where blacks made a stand, where we had great civil rights leaders that tried to make a difference. Martin Luther King, his technique or his strategy was a strategy of peace. Where we had other leaders like Malcolm X, his strategy was by any means necessary. Now, some people, when they look at history, they say to themselves, why didn't they just pick themselves up by their bootstraps and just work hard and just make it? People have come from other countries and have come to the United States and started businesses and they made it. Why can't blacks do this? What's the problem? The problem is that black skin, for some reason, that black skin identifies that person as we must stop them and we must hold them back. There's several examples through our history, recent history, and history about 100 years ago. I would like to talk about a few of these examples. In Forsyth County, the city of Oscarville was a thriving black community. It is now under a lake, and on top of the lake is boating, fishing, restaurants. It's a vacation resort in the summertime. Used to be a black community, but it was flooded because the blacks were deemed as a threat. Cowaliga, Alabama was flooded, and now it is known as Lake Martin. In New York, Central Park, a thriving black community. What happened? Through eminent domain, they felt that this needed to be wiped out and changed into something else. And now it is called the Central Park Reservoir. Many of you know about Black Wall Street 1921, a thriving black community. There were railroads, there was farming, schools, grocery stores, a transportation system, doctors, lawyers. It was a thriving community in Oklahoma in 1921. It was destroyed, set on fire. Blacks ran out of town, shot, killed, because someone accused a black man of touching a white woman in an elevator. And they took that and they ran with it. The government didn't do anything to stop it. There were no reparations for this incident back in 1921. Let's go to Susanna Village in Alabama. Another thriving black community. There were banks, sawmills, post office, a church, and a blacksmith shop. Just thriving. But what happened? The authorities, the officials came through and they said, we don't need this here. We got to move this out. They call it eminent domain. Well, today they call it eminent domain. Eminent domain is when the government can come through and need a property or need land that happens to be occupied by families, farmers, homes. Well, eminent domain states that they must be paid a fair market price for their property, for highways and buildings can be put through. But this did not happen in Wall Street in 1921. This did not happen in Susanna, Alabama. This did not happen. This did not happen in Forsyth, Georgia, in Oscarville. Blacks were thriving. They were working. They decided we can't work within the wider WIDER society and be accepted as viable contributors to society, then we can start our own. But when blacks went to start their own, some people felt that this was a threat. This was a threat to the powers that be. And they came and they destroyed it. Now, what's happening in our society today is you can't just go out and lynch a black man, kill him and hang him in a tree. Not today, not anymore, not without consequences, not without getting a life prison sentence or a death sentence, even if you're white, Spanish, Puerto Rican, Indian, whatever you are. If you commit the crime, you pay the consequences. There was a time where you could kill a black man, string him up, have a Sunday school picnic while his body's sitting there burning in the background. While the body is burning in the background. If you Google it, there's photos available on the internet. We can't do this anymore. This does not happen anymore. Now, the laws can protect you. The laws can bring offenses to justice. Now, there are some people that they don't like those laws. They don't agree with those laws, and they take the laws into their own hands. That's why sometimes you find people that, they're lost to the census. We can't find them. And then years or months later, you find their bodies. They're dead. They're wrapped up in a wrestling mat. They're gutted in the street somewhere. Because some people don't care that the laws say that all men should be treated equal. Some people feel like, no, I don't agree with this thing. I remember when I first moved to Georgia in 1983, I started getting close to the city lights and I was getting all excited. The beautiful buildings. I was from a small town outside of Cleveland, a little small country town, Elyria, Ohio. And I'm coming down to Atlanta and I'm seeing the skyline and I'm like, this is great. I'm going to make it down here. And I remember turning on the radio and it was a talk show. And a man got on the microphone and he said, I don't think any black person is smarter than me. I don't think that they deserve the jobs and the opportunities that I deserve as a white man because they're black and there's something wrong with them. And while I was driving down 75 heading to Atlanta, I almost turned around and went back home. I said, what am I getting myself into? What is this? I've got some stories of some experiences that I had while battling and managing through Atlanta, and I will cover that later on another forum. But what I want to address now is there are opportunities that the government has set up. There is affirmative action on companies that need to diversify their employment pool. There are laws against unlawful discharge, which means firing someone for no reason. There are laws that protect minorities against racism, and there's laws against systemic racism. Now, systemic racism, at times, is more difficult to detect. Straight racism, when they call you the N-word and say, get your black so-and-so out of here, we don't want y'all, that's pretty obvious. But systemic racism, when people smile at you and say, yes, put an application in, and the company is 99% white and 1% Asian, and there's no blacks hired when blacks make up 40% of that particular town. It's more difficult to identify systemic racism because you can say, well, they just weren't qualified. They didn't have the educational background. They didn't have the work experience. They didn't interview well. You can put all kinds of things in the pot to discredit someone. And it's more difficult to detect. It's more difficult to detect. I can remember when I was in college, there was a professor that your whole semester, 16 weeks of study, is one paper you write in the classroom by hand. And they asked you one question: tell me everything you know about management by objectives. And you just wrote. And I remember writing, having a clear understanding, and that professor failed at me. And I remember me going back to that professor saying, I'm going to take you again. This is not a difficult class and you must have misunderstood me. I'm going to take you again. And the professor was like, okay, you can take me again. Took it again, same thing. At the end of the semester, 16 weeks, I wrote double. I was just fluid, dynamic, and profound. He failed me again. I remember walking down the campus with my report card. I couldn't believe it. And I looked up and he was right in front of me walking by. He grabbed his briefcase and went down to the crouch, and I turned away right away with a tear in my eye, walking away, realizing that this man's goal was to stop me, to defeat me by giving a subjective test. An objective test would have been, it's either right or wrong. The answer to number 1 is A, and the answer to number 2 is B. The answer to number 3 is C. It's simple. You can't refutate that. But when you're writing, your feelings and your comprehension and your understanding, they can take that and they can take that and cut it up. And this was his plan, and this is what I believe his plan was, especially after his response when he saw me walking by. The confirmation of that is I took the class a third time with another professor. This professor, I just sat in the back, got the book. I kept quiet and I wondered, am I going to fail? Is this school set up to destroy me, to stop me? Long story short, I got an A for that class. This was a learning moment for me, and I spoke about this in an earlier broadcast. We must utilize the things that have been put before us, the opportunities that have been set for us. We can make it. We can succeed. Yes, there is racism. There is systemic racism, but there also is a plan. There's some people in politics, there's some government officials that are trying to be fair, that are trying to be just, that are trying to exhibit righteousness when it comes to fairness and opportunities for all people. The problem with our people is we don't take advantage of those opportunities. We're trying to undercover. We're still trying to rob and steal or cut corners or pull each other down. If there's an opportunity to get a loan out, a student loan out, to go to school, to obtain training for a particular profession, we should do this. We should get the training based on our potential and based on our past experience. We should get the training. If we have the ability to complete a 2-year associate's degree or a 4-year college degree, or even go on to a master or a doctorate level, there's opportunities that are set where we can walk the path and we can make it. Things have changed. So as we climb and ascend up the mountain, or the black man's mountain, we must utilize those things that have been put in place for us. Now, there are still some of us who want to go the bad route. They want to lose their temper and road rage. They want to cheat on a test. They want to manipulate the system and rob someone. And then they end up getting caught. You end up getting your legal record tarnished. And then when you're trying to apply for loans, when you're trying to apply for certain jobs, those jobs are no longer available to you. For example, let's say there's 100 job opportunities for you based on your potential. Some of these jobs are going to need training. Some of these jobs are going to need a 4-year degree. Some of these jobs are going to need a master's or doctorate level or a doctorate level to obtain these jobs. Without a degree, half of those jobs are not going to be available to you. Say that 100 comes down to 50. But if you end up with a felony on your record, or you commit a crime, a heinous crime, and you have a criminal record, then those 50 jobs that you qualified for without a degree, that's cut tremendously. Might be down to 8 or 9 different jobs that you could possibly get. The pay is not going to be that well, and the longevity of that job is not going to be good because you chose to tarnish your record. So, in summary, I would like to say that yes, we are living in some difficult times, but the times are not as difficult as they used to be. Things are better. Things have improved. And the central part of my message is that we should take advantage of the new opportunities that have been placed at our feet. Whether you're black, you're immigrant, Asian, white, young, or old, you can make it. You can take advantage of these opportunities and you can be a positive contributor to society. But on the other hand, if you choose to do crime, if you choose to go the other way and destroy your opportunities and your potential and your chances, you're going to have to deal with the consequences. I'm Doc V, and I'll see you next time.